Welcome back to Shower Thoughts with Ariane. Hi, everybody. So, if you did not see my initial very short intro video, this channel is my attempt to share information so you can make better informed decisions for yourself. That information is going to cover things like personal finance, labor law, overall economics. Do keep in mind, I'm not an economist and I am not an attorney, but this is general information that, while is available, may not be commonly known. Just because something is available, if you don't know that you can look for it, it's sometimes hard to get. So, through no fault of our own. So this is obviously, it's not meant to be an advice channel. I'm just sharing information that you can pick through and see if it works for you or helps you or gives you somewhere to dig deeper. Bear with me as I figure this out. Editing may be sketchy for a while. I'm definitely not a professional. I'm just proud of myself that I managed to find some video recording software that will also allow me to screen share, so I can share my screen and what things that I've found and where I've found them and where you can look for them. I have a goal of trying to post about once a month and trying to keep these videos within 30 minutes. Anything more than 30 minutes with some of the heavy information that this can be, I think, is overwhelming. So, trying to keep it in bite-sized pieces, which also means that some of these larger topics that I want to cover might take several videos just to be able to break it down into smaller chunks of data. I'll tell you, if you don't like what I have to say, that's okay. You don't have to. Even accountants have differing opinions on investing, savings, and spending. So there may be information here where it doesn't apply to you, and that's okay. If you want to drop a comment on my video about how it doesn't apply to you or why it doesn't apply to you, maybe that would give me some perspective to seek out other methodologies. On things like budgeting, there are gazillions of options. In a future video, I hope to maybe touch on some of the tools available for budgeting and thought processes behind budgeting. You know, there's various rules on splitting things up. You know, this much should go to this much should go to that, this much should go to this. But they're not all consistent and they're not all the same. So I hope to maybe touch on some of that in a future video. I am going to do my best to avoid things like politics specifically. But unfortunately, a lot of politics bleed into economics. So I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I do encourage you to really look at how your representatives are voting in regard to your economic interests. And that's, you know, those things will come up as we discuss some of these topics. Today's topic is a bit about wage stagnation and what that actually means, what a cost of living raise or increase is versus an actual merit raise, and how that is participating in the flatlining of wages over the years, and the difference between productivity growth versus wage growth. So wages have flatlined in comparison to productivity and in comparison to inflation. So what that means is every dollar that we make in 2024 buys less than it made in previous years because it hasn't kept up with inflation. So I have a couple of charts. Let me see. So if you see this chart right here, actual income from 1979 through, this looks like it goes through about 2009, 2010, is, while it's not flat, it's definitely not keeping up with what it would be if it had kept up with inflation. So we're making significantly less every year. So when you get a cost of living raise at work and it's 2%, 3%, but inflation is 3%, 4%, you're making less money than you were the prior year, effectively, because everything else has gone. And it has kind of become this trend in businesses to only give to 1, 2, 3%, a 50-cent raise. It's become this trend, and it's become generally accepted that businesses, that's the raise that we can expect. And it hasn't always been that way. A merit raise should be above and beyond what the inflation rate is of the current, the average inflation rate, like maybe the last year. And that's honestly pretty rare these days. So, and if you're getting more, fantastic. You're working for a company that actually recognizes that, hopefully. And if you're not getting that, what do we do about it? Because I don't want to just use this channel to complain about, oh, here's all the doom and gloom and the woe is me. I do want to also offer some solutions. I try not to complain without having some sort of solution or action. So there's a couple of things, I guess, before we get into the things we can do about it, there's a couple of more data points that I'd like to show. So this chart shows our wages, and here's where it really looks like it's flatlined. In 1973, 1978, there was a decade in there. Interest rates were incredibly high. Inflation was incredibly high. Corporate tax rates also plummeted due to some economic policies that were put into effect. But productivity has gone up steadily. So we're doing, we're making more, we're creating more. There's more output, there's more information, there's more workload, but we're effectively making exactly the same as we always have. And that, I mean, it sucks. It sucks. Also, so I really doubt that I'm talking to anybody in the top 1% of wage earners, but if I am high, I have some issues, which you probably won't like. The rest of us in the bottom 90%, so the top 1% wage grew 138% since 1979, while wages for the bottom 90% grew 15%. So those whole, those whole trickle-down economics, if we give a bunch of tax breaks to people at the top, they're going to spend it and trickle it down. My first question is, why should we expect a trickle? It should be pouring down if it really worked. And two, the economics of the past 40 years has shown that doesn't work. So the next time your representative wants to vote for massive corporate tax breaks, I have a problem with that. Take issue with that. Because these corporations, especially after the pandemic, have been reporting record profits, but they don't have enough money to pay us more. I don't think they're telling us the truth. Big topic, probably going to address that more later. Obviously, I would need to find some more actual data points on that. But just looking at this chart alone tells us that maybe, just maybe, they don't actually have it right. Let's see. And this is really just breaking it into 3 pieces instead of 2 pieces. Middle class and low wage have stagnated, really, whereas high wage earners, I would argue that they're not actually earning it, we're earning it for them, are skyrocketing. So this is, what website is this even? I forgot. The Economic Policy Institute, which is literally, that's all they do. They study economics. And while you can manipulate numbers to give you the story you want, it's harder with historical data. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody might tell me I'm wrong. This is the Pew Research Center. And again, wage increases in the US rise to the top earners. Yeah. I could read this whole article to you, but I don't really want to put you to sleep. Here you see wages and salaries are relatively flat, whereas total benefits, healthcare, etc., have the costs have gone up every year. That's been almost a consistent straight line. It's a little squiggly, but not really that much. And if you'd like to kind of calculate how far off our wages are from inflation over time, all you have to do is Google something like inflation calculator. I found 3 different inflation calculators where you can put in the start year, the end year, and the dollar amount, and it will tell you what the historical, if you made $30,000 in this case, I typed in 1980. For example, I think my dad started in his corporation that he worked at in around 1980 at around $30,000. I started my first job in 2005, my first corporate job in 2005 for like $32,000. And let's just put in 2005. So in 2005, it would take $71,000 to buy the same amount as $30,000 bought in 1980. So I was effectively working for half of what my dad was in 1980. Half. If I had started that job in 1980, do you think I would have taken it for $15,000? That would have been unheard of. So why haven't these wages kept up? So that's, and if I typed in 2014, now you would need $86,000. Not 2014. I'm sorry, 2024. I'm off a decade. My apologies. 106. Oh, it went through 2022. It must not go any further. So $30,000 in 1980 is $106,000 in 2022. If you're starting your first job out of college for $106,000, I want you to call me because I have to know. I have to know that that happens in something other than like crazy tech. Even tech, I can't even imagine a tech job starting for that much. It'd be wild. I want to know. I have to know. Here's another one where I calculated it. This one did go through to 2024. So $30,000 in 1980 is worth $111,000 today. So if you think about it, he started working for $30,000 in 1980, and in 1981 bought a house for, I think they paid $60,000. So twice his wage. Not bad. But if you're starting a job at 35, it's probably maybe closer to 40 now. 45, I don't know. $45,000 starting wage. That means you would expect a house to be about 90. Not if it's still standing. Not right now. A house up the street in my neighborhood, and let me tell you guys, it's not a fancy neighborhood, went for like $250,000 this summer. This is what the millennials are upset about. This is what, when you see all those memes about, millennials being upset about not being able to buy a house. This is what they're talking about. $30,000 wage, $60,000 house, $40,000 wage, we'll just say, $250,000 house. I think the median house price in the U.S. is like $450,000, and that's median, so that's midline. So there's a lot of range around that, but that's midline. I mean, my budget doesn't go that high, and I've done pretty okay for myself as best I can. My budget definitely doesn't go that high. I'm sure some high interest loan would be happy to take me on, which we'll talk about that in a different that's a bad idea. We'll talk about that in a different video. So, okay, so here's all of the negatives. So, what do we do about it? Anything that we do about it is going to be slow going and will take some effort. And I will tell you, if we want things to change overall, we have to work together. We just have to work together. Wages have flatlined for a couple of reasons. Erosion of collective bargaining, unions. And unions is such a big topic. I really want to address that all by itself. And I need to do some research because I've worked a couple of jobs that were unionized. However, they were governmental unions, which were by law non-striking unions. Like we legitimately could not strike. I don't know what they would have done if we'd tried anyway, but that was the agreement. We will discuss it, but I would encourage you before we get to the union series. It's kind of in my head what I'm calling it. I would encourage you to really think about why you are anti-union if you are anti-union. Because businesses are anti-union. And employers discourage and dislike unions because they strengthen employees. They wouldn't fight against it if it didn't work. If unions were as ineffective as employers try to sell, why do they fight so hard against it? So, the erosion of collective bargaining, which means maybe we need to really start actively pursuing unionization across industries, across locations, you name it. They could probably unionize. And then suddenly we have a much larger voice. Inflation has been used as an excuse to not raise wages. But inflation as an excuse to not raise wages only works if you're also not reporting record profits. Like, I'm sorry, you cannot report massive. I'm trying to find this meme. I can't find it. You cannot report massive, here it is, 2023 profits by company. And this is from Robert Reich, who, if you guys don't know who Robert Reich is, we will probably talk about him, but he was an economist under 3 different presidents on both sides of the aisle, and has been teaching at, what's that, Berkeley, I think, for years. Brilliant man, super good at sharing information. Here's an example. Starbucks made $24.56 billion of profit in 2023, which means it could have given each of its 400,000 employees an $11,000 raise and would have still made $20 billion in profit. Inflation is an excuse that they've been using and getting away with for too long. We have to start getting these employers, to raise wages. And if they say, well, if they legitimately can't pay, then that means that they are either bad at business or expanded too fast or have overstretched other resources, because you cannot pay employees poverty wages. You cannot expect somebody else to be in poverty to fund your business. That's an unreasonable ask. So, ways that you can, one, determine if you're being paid fairly, at least in comparison to your current employees or current coworkers, is talk to your coworkers. And maybe your employer says you cannot discuss wages. Guess what? That's illegal. It is illegal to tell an employee that they cannot discuss wages with each other, with the media, with the public, with labor organizations, with work centers, and if you know no other resource the National Labor Relations Board is a resource that you should know. Now, okay, you've talked to your coworkers, and the new guy that just got hired is making $5,000 more than you. What? There are ways to address it. Do not kick your boss's door in and demand immediately to be paid exactly what your coworker has been. That's probably not going to go for you. But schedule a meeting with your boss. Be mad about it, but go home, be mad about it, get it out of your system. Come back, talk to your boss calmly. Explain that you have X number of months, years, whatever, experience. You've been a valuable employee. You do the work. Give examples. And then state clearly that you feel that you should be paid at least what the new employee is making, if not. And if they start to question, well, how did you find out how much they make? Do remember that as part of the National Labor Relations Board, the act that we're talking about, you cannot be fired or retaliated against for discussing your wages. So if they want to discipline you or your coworker for discussing wages, quote the law. The National Labor Relations Board says in this act, I don't even remember the act. It's not going to give it to me, is it? The right, I'd have to dig deeper to actually get the act number. But, oh, there it is. The Act 29, 1935. This is not a new law. This is not a new law, but employers are counting on you knowing it. So, I can't promise that this is going to go smoothly for you. I can't promise that your boss isn't going to try to retaliate. However, if you believe that an employer is interfering with your rights as an employee under the National Labor Relations Act to discuss your wages, you can call their regional office and get assistance in filing an unfair labor practice charge, or you can e-file the charge. So it's right there on their website that if for some reason suddenly you don't get that raise that you were told you were going to get or expected to get, or you don't get that promotion, or worse, you get a demotion or get fired, immediately go to the National Labor Relations Board website and file a claim. I've never had to, so I can't tell you how it goes, how it works. If anybody has filed a claim for unfair labor practices, I'd love to know about it. So there's one option. You do have the right to not talk about your wages as well. So if your coworker is pressuring you to talk to them about your wages, you do not have to. Another option, do a job search. Do it even if you're not job hunting. Do a job search on your company. See if they have any positions open and what they're hiring for. A lot of companies don't list the salary, but a lot of them do. So you can kind of backdoor find out that way. Hey, boss, here's your job posting for this position. This is more than I make. Can we discuss that? Because I don't feel like I'm being fairly compensated if the new person that you're hiring is making more than I am. You can also search competitors, see what the competitors are paying. If you're willing to jump to a new position at a new company, do it. Do it. I found a horrifying statistic. Absolutely horrifying statistic that employees staying employed at the same company for over 2 years on average is going to make you earn less over your lifetime by about 50%. The days of staying in a company for your entire career are dead, at least at current wage raise practices. I can't believe that that statistic is as high as that. It's not the first time I've seen the statement, but it's the first time I've seen a percentage applied to it. I don't know how they calculated that. And this article is 2014, so it's more than 9 years old. So I can only imagine it's worse now. So the average raise an employee could expect in 2014 was 3%. The best performers could hope for a 4.5% raise. But the average raise an employee receives for leaving a company and going to a new position is between 10 and 20%. So if you're leaving a company and you're trying to figure out what you should ask for, if there should be a salary range posted, but within that range, what you should ask for, take your current salary and multiply it times 1.1. That's 110%. So that's what, or better, I suppose I could do the math here. See if that works out in my head. I'm no accountant. 71.5. Okay, it works. I just wanted to make sure the math worked in my head. Sometimes percentages are weird. So that's 10%. If you want 20%, do 1.2. That is your goal salary at a new position. And I think this phenomena happens because a lot of employers are coming to the realization that their employees are not willing, new employees are not willing to come to a company unless they are compensated at a better rate than where they're leaving. So that's why all of a sudden these new employees are making what they're making, but then their raises just kind of peter out. I was at a company for less than 6 months when an annual review period came rolling around. And because I'd been at the company for less than 6 months, I didn't get a review and thus didn't get a raise. So my first raise was like a year and 9 months. That's kind of crappy. No, you shouldn't be able to walk in the door and immediately get a raise, but also everybody gets a raise on the exact same day, which is easier paperwork wise, I suppose. Okay, so you're not really ready to talk to your boss about your wage or your coworkers. Feels uncomfortable. You're not really ready to jump to a new company. All right. So other ways to get some of your own back is stop giving extra time to employers, and they've dubbed it quiet quitting. The actual phrase should be working your wage or acting your wage. And take your time off. You have PTO. It is part of your compensation package. And if your employer isn't making space or time for you to be able to take any time off, or you take time off and suddenly when you get back, you may as well have not taken that time off because now you have triple the work. That's not a good working environment, and you need to keep that in mind for potential opportunities in the future. For a lot of us, where we were raised in this, work extra hard and you'll reap the rewards, it is hard to break that mindset. And no, I have budgeted 8 hours of my day for 8 hours worth of work. If you have given me more work than that 8 hours consistently, it happens occasionally. Occasional is one thing. But if you consistently are working more than 8 hours because you have more work than you can fit into 8 hours, that company is understaffed. If everybody is so busy that they can't cover your stuff while you're gone, your company is understaffed. Because what happens if you get hurt? What happens if you get sick? What happens if you just want to take like a 2-week vacation? Now, the hurt or sick are a little less within your control, so let's stick with those. You get hurt, you get sick, you're going to be out for 6 weeks. Now, everybody's in a hard spot. Your boss, you, your coworkers, all because they didn't budget for space. They didn't make space for unforeseen circumstances. And everybody's working on such this lean attitude of get as much out of these employees. We saw the productivity chart. The productivity out of employees is through the roof, and yet they're all understaffed. Well, if we're so productive, why are we working 40 hours a week still? Why is that even a thing? And I think there was a European country that did an experiment where they went to a 4-day work week, not 4 10-hour days, 4 8-hour days, but maintained their full salary. So they didn't take a pay cut. And they found that the employees were happier, more productive, and better rested. In fact, a lot of the companies stuck with it. I will do some research and find that, because the first time I read that article, I was fascinated by it. And every employer's butt in the US seized up. God forbid. So, and when it comes to stop giving your extra time to employers, I can hear a lot of you know, because I've said the same thing. I'm salaried. It's expected of me. I could be written up or fired or not promoted or not get a raise because I'm not doing my share. And there's a whole history of what it means to be a salaried worker, what it's supposed to mean to be a salaried worker. The minimum wage of salary workers has not gone up in, I'm going to say 50 years, but I don't have an actual statistic in front of me. So let's put an asterisk on that. So we'll get into like the whole history of what it meant to be a salaried employee versus an hourly employee, and how businesses have stretched that into just a different way to be able to abuse their employees. So we will cover that, because that is, we should know. You should know what it means to be salaried, and then look at it with a critical eye when employers are very excited to offer you a salaried position. Other short-term things that we can do, because in fairness, a lot of these solutions are very long-term. They take a lot of work. Looking for a new job takes a lot of work. It takes time. It's exhausting. So, and I'm not gonna, the last time I did a job search, I swore I didn't ever want to do it again. And then I read that statistic about staying in a job for more than 2 years. And I, of course, was horrified. Because that means about every 2 years, I really should be job searching. Really. And that's tiring. And I can't sugarcoat that for you. It's tiring. And I'm sure any of you who've done a recent job search know it's exhausting. These employers want the moon, and they want to give you pennies for it. So some short-term solutions that I want to cover in some future videos. Budgeting. There are apps out there. There's Excel. There's courses. There's Dave Ramsey does a budgeting course. I don't love and I don't hate his methodology. So I like parts of it, we'll just say. I don't like having, I don't even know if he still teaches it, with folders of cash for each budget section. I don't love that part. But there are other things like snowballing your debt. That is a really good idea, which we will cover. You can use Excel. If you're an Excel fiend like I am, I love Excel. There's nothing cooler than a nifty Excel formula. I know. Nerd, not even sorry about it. There are budgeting apps. There are apps that you can get on your phone that I think you can link to your bank. So look into some of these apps because they seem interesting, where they automatically categorize your spending, and you can probably modify it or customize it for your own needs. So you can see up to the minute where you're spending. Are you on track for your budget? And we'll talk about like how can you even decide what your budget is. The way I just have determined kind of what my loose budget is for certain categories is I take the prior year's data. And it took me a number of years ago, it took me a whole year to get a prior year's data. And I have basically the average of what I spent over the 12 months, because some months you're going to spend more. Some months you're going to spend less. On the months you spend less, you stash that money for the months that you know you're going to have a bigger expenditure. Barter with your friends, neighbors, strangers. I'm a member on Facebook with what's called the Buy Nothing group. And it's a local group. It's by neighborhood. And if I have stuff that I don't really need anymore, I don't want to go through the trouble of taking it to a donation center. I don't want to try and sell it because you list something on Facebook Marketplace and the first 50 responses you get are scammers. I'd like it to go to a good home. I don't care about getting any money for it at this point. I just don't want to throw something perfectly functional away. So I listed on the Buy Nothing group. Hey, can anybody use this? And most of the time, there's usually 1, 2, 5 people who are like, oh yeah, I can totally use it. And so you trade. Just the other day, I was looking for something I don't really want to spend on. It was actually this screen behind me. I just wanted to kind of hide some of the mess of my office behind me. Hey, does anybody have one of those trifold screens that they're not using? Somebody right away. Yep, I've got one in the garage you can have. Cool. I spent all of $0 and met a neighbor to do that. So that, this is how we can stretch the money we're currently making further. Trade with your neighbors. Sometimes I have a plethora, just an obscene amount of tomatoes. I plant tomatoes every year, always end up with obscene amounts. Somebody else might have an obscene amount of cucumbers. Let's trade. I can only eat so many tomatoes, and I do love a good cucumber. So, trade with your neighbors. Share labor with your neighbors. I kind of loosely talked to him. We never got it off the ground because then COVID hit, and we didn't want to infect each other. I had talked with the neighbors. Several of us have larger projects that we want to do around the house. Well, if we trade labor, if we spent a weekend working at neighbor A's house and did their project, and then another weekend at neighbor B's project and did their project, and then a weekend at my house and did my project. Well, something that would have taken me by myself probably 4, 5, 6 weekends, got it hammered, or we'll just say 3 or 4 weekends. Well, in the course of 3 weekends, not only did I not have to do it by myself, but I got it done in a single shot. I may have to revive that with the neighbors because it would be an easy way to spread the load. So those are kind of some ideas and we'll talk more about other ideas, things that we can do to kind of spread what we're making now further, make it go a little further. Budgeting can't solve everything if everything is more expensive than what you make, and I acknowledge that. I do. But we can try. We can try to do things. We can try to find tips and tricks. We can try to get better jobs with better pay. This is my hope for all of us. And I'll say it over and over and over again globally. We have to work together. We have to look out for each other and ourselves. But by looking out for ourselves with each other, ourselves not at the expense of each other. How about that? If we look out for ourselves, but not at the expense of others, we all benefit. And hopefully with this channel, I'm sharing some information with you. I am going to put some of these links in the bottom of the YouTube video in the description so that you can see the websites that I found. Obviously, there's probably 10 websites that say, oh, Americans don't actually have it that bad. Okay. What? I'm going to read it, but I'm going to read it skeptically. Because when huge economic think tanks are saying the opposite, I'm going to take a critical eye to these websites that say, no, everything's fine. You're just whining. Don't buy your Starbucks coffee and you'll be a millionaire in no time. So I'm going to share all these links that I've found. If you have a comment or if you have an opinion, whether it agrees with me or not, I'll listen. I'll listen if you don't agree with me, because sometimes listening to the things we don't agree with is the only way we grow. I can't promise it will change my mind, but it might force me to consider new data. And I'm all about considering new data, even if it doesn't exactly tell me what I want to hear. It is uncomfortable sometimes. It's gonna be. Growth is uncomfortable. Think of it as growing pains for the mind. That's how I think of it anyway. So again, if we work together to raise each other up, we all win. We have to decide we want to do that. And we have to have good data to do that with. So that's what I'm hoping to share data with you so you can make your own decisions, hopefully informed decisions. And maybe this will help. Maybe this will help all of us. Maybe it'll help one of you. If it helps one person, I'm going to consider this a success because I don't know what I'm doing here. I know I have this information. I know I want to share it. Wasn't sure how to go about it. Here it is. Let's be gentle with your editing comments because I'm not going to lie. Like, editing will be rough for a while because I still got to figure that out. I'm an accountant. I'm not this video person. So I'm going to wrap it up today and hopefully you got something good out of this. So friends, enemies, those yet to be determined, and acquaintances, have a great day. And let me know what you think. All right. Bye.